Hey everybody, it's Ayla, Wife with a Purpose. Excited to be coming to you. It is the week after Independence Week, after 4th of July week, and I hope you guys are having an excellent time. And a lot of people are traveling. It's that season. I hope you're able to catch the show today or watching it as a recording, because I'm super excited about today's show, and I think that it fits in really well with the whole theme of July and Independence Day and the pioneering spirit of America and everything that goes along with that, apple pie and baseball and that good feeling we all have this time of year. So this is a really exciting program for me. If you have never seen one of my programs before, I am Ayla. I go under the name Wife with a Purpose. You can follow me over at Twitter at Ayla Wife. That is AYLA Wife. And you can also follow me on the internet at wifewithapurpose.com. And you can link up there to all my social media sources, as well as pretty much daily content at this point, if you can believe it. Through the help of Traditional Mike over on Twitter, I've been able, him and I together have been able to get out at least something every day on the website. So definitely be checking there. Check me over at Gab at Wife with a Purpose. I am there as well, and on Instagram as Wife with a Purpose, if you like to see those trad life photos. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome my guest today. He is a subscriber and fan of my show and what I do here. And he left a really intriguing comment a couple of weeks ago that I just couldn't let pass. He seemed like a fascinating guy. So I said, would you please come on the show? So Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ayla. It's awesome to be on with you. I know I'm not the usual guest on the alt-right sort of side of things, but I think in the spirit of America, people are going to like this show a lot.
Yes, I think so too. I think so too. And I think it is great to have dialogues with all sorts of people, obviously, and talking about all sorts of issues and backgrounds and where we have commonalities and everything else. So tell us, obviously, my viewers are probably not familiar with you. So give us a little background about who you are, how old you are, like what is your life like, who are you?
Okay, so that's awesome. My name is Tyler Ellis. I'm 21 years old. I live here in New Jersey. I'm a self-employed entrepreneur. The reason Ayla wanted me to come on the show is because I am let me see how many greats. I think about the 9th great-grandson of Captain Josiah Robinson, who fought in the American Revolution in 2 different regiments. He was a colored soldier. Most people don't know that about 1/5 of all of George Washington's soldiers were actually Black. That's something we kind of miss in school. We're just, talking about slavery, but we don't get the whole picture. So that's why Ayla wanted to have me on. My cousin also works security for Donald Trump's administration. So you can get a little bit of inside knowledge here. I'm hugely into martial arts. I have 3 different black belts under my name. I've trained self-defense all over the world. I'm into shooting guns and all that fun stuff. So it's going to be awesome, this show.
Terrific, terrific. So some of the topics, let's just dive into your ancestors and the American Revolution, because I think it's so excellent that you pointed out, when we talk about Black history in America, at least since I've been alive, and I'm almost 40 years old. So, I went through school in the 80s and 90s. And when we talked about, Black History Month and all of that, I mean, all we heard was slavery, 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 and Martin Luther King, and literally nothing else. And so, I think a lot of people don't know that there were soldiers that fought in the Revolutionary War, or even if they do, I know that it's sometimes in popular media, like movies and so forth, it's really shown as like, oh, the evil white man forced these Black guys to fight for this country that treated them like garbage anyway. It's this kind of a narrative. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, that's definitely what I've seen. But again, it couldn't be further from the truth. I could definitely touch on the history, but I'll get into my own family history if that's cool.
Yeah, oh, please do. That's exactly what I would love to hear.
Okay, so just a little bit of background on myself. Like most quote-unquote African-American people in this country, I am not fully 100% African. I have yet to find that person yet. I mean, but apparently we don't talk about that, but whatever. So I haven't taken any DNA tests specifically, but I know I have ancestors that were Black, that were Irish, that were Scottish, that were Native Americans. So I have a really dynamic past, but most of my family is obviously Black, right? So that's obvious. And what we don't talk about, and before I get into my own history, is that when that sort of narrative that you hear with the American Revolution and Black people and slavery and all the, it's just to promote white guilt. But we could talk about that later in the show. It has nothing to do with reality or facts. And it's quite frankly just racist against Black children in America to be hearing, oh, well, there's slavery, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, you're not really giving the Black kids a positive image of themselves, but I'm glad you're talking about slavery and racism and negativity and all this other stuff, right? But it's convincing. So my ancestor who fought for the American Revolution, there's actually two stories, by the way. So on my mother's side, I'm related to Captain Josiah Robinson. He fought in the 13th Regiment for the Massachusetts Infantry, and he also fought in the Regiment for New Jersey. So that was the 2nd Regiment for New Jersey. So he saw combat at the Battle of Monmouth, the Battle of Lexington, and he also saw a battle at the Battle of Bunker Hill. That's one of the most famous, intriguing battles in American history. So his experience, I don't have like intimate details because of how long it's been, but he's descended from Massachusetts, and most people don't know how many Black people actually served in Massachusetts or live in Massachusetts. That's a whole nother area of history that's not even talked about. But yeah, he's definitely there. He was actually born into slavery, because remember at the time, slavery wasn't just something in the South, it was across America. So at the time, he actually got his freedom. George Washington makes the announcement, anybody can serve in the American Revolution, anybody. Black, white, doesn't matter. We're taking any volunteers we can find because we're about to fight the largest military in the world, right? So we're taking any and all volunteers that we can find. He goes to serve, gets the full pension while he's here. There's no black pension, white people get paid more or whatever. No, full compensation, full pension. He gets full retirement. He's a soldier. There's no black, white. We didn't have that. We integrated regiments in the American Revolution. When was the last time you heard that? I mean, we have Black politicians elected in the 1700s. It's absolutely crazy. Well, we can get into that, but that's just a little bit of background into that subject, really.
Wow. Okay. So how did you, is this something that's been passed down, like knowledge in your family? I mean, how did you come across all of this? Where did you begin your research journey? And
well, it wasn't really prevalent at first. For years of my life, I really was never into family history or, looking back at ancestry or any of this stuff. I was just, a dude with an America shirt on. I wasn't really into this sort of stuff. But I actually found I was going into old stuff from like family history. It was actually my dad who was really into saving family history and all this other stuff. And I remember a conversation one time. It was my grandmother on my mom's side, and she was giving over something to my dad. And it was an actual document. It was one of these old-fashioned documents from like the 1700s that had been totally preserved. And it was talking about Josiah Robinson, infantry, Massachusetts, this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, really? I'm related to people in the American Revolution? Because remember, I grew up in New Jersey, and New Jersey is a liberal, anti-American capital of the world. It's absolutely insane. So I didn't know anything about this. And I started looking at history, and I started writing things down, and I started looking at Black history in America, and I realized, okay, we're just lying about everything about history, but that's cool. Whatever. I guess we're into that today. I thought we were supposed to be living in truth, but I guess not. So that's really where it was. But that's with mostly anything. You got to dig through old shelves, old relics, and find stuff buried under stuff that's not supposed to be seen, because that's where truth really lies in this day and age. And that's what family history or America or the Western world or anything for that matter. So that's really where it got for me, just really digging back into history, family history that I never heard before.
Oh, yeah. And I think you bring up something that's so important for all people, and especially in America right now. Be doing your family history, be doing that research, evenings, weekends. There's lots of services, like familysearch.org and ancestry.com and all of these resources that we have now, but also get things in a hard copy, because having just all digital material, I think we've really seen, even in just the last 5 to 10 years, how tech companies and everything that have a different agenda can alter things. They literally go back and change things. If you've got an ebook on your Amazon, they can just go back and delete it, even if it's on your, your personal Kindle shelf, or they can go back and edit it at any point. And I think one of the best things that we can do, just even as individuals living today, is write down what we know. Keep a journal, write it down. Paper can last hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of years under the right conditions. write it down, tuck it away. And when, I always advocate for people, when you come across things in antique shops and thrift shops, when you find these old books, especially old history books, snag them and take them home and put them on your bookshelf, because they really are just trying to cleanse kind of in a liberal way, in a communist way, and all of the history, and it's really hard. You have to do your own digging to find out the truth. And I think that for our posterity later on to come, they need to have the truth written down for them as well, because they're probably, if things continue the way they are, going to have to do some digging. And so if they've got their grandma or their grandpa's diary, things like this, firsthand accounts of how life really was, that's when we can go back. And even now, you can go back and read your grandma's diary, your great grandma's diary. You can see that all of these sexisms and homophobia-isms and all of this trash that's thrown at us now about our ancestors really wasn't something that existed in the way that it's presented. And so when you have those firsthand accounts, it's so incredibly valuable. So I always encourage people, be doing that in your own personal life, because you are making history right now, whether or not you realize it. And you do have posterity in the future that are going to be looking to you for the truth. And so preserve the truth of the past and collect the truth of today. So let's dive into some of these topics that you sent me. The first one that you were hoping we could touch on was changing demographics through American history, and the overall decline of American culture and patriotism. So let's take the demographics issue first, because certainly that is something that's near and dear to my heart, that I've talked a lot about on my channel. And how do you see this from your perspective?
Well, there's a lot of things to that. And I just want to respond to what you were saying. We're living in an age where the left has been given so much control of the dialogue, whether it's with the media or the government sphere or the education system. We're in sort of a DEFCON 1 situation. I need every person, black, white, blue, yellow, whatever you are. If you live in the Western world, we're living in chaotic times. I was just watching a video before I came on here. It was this fat Hispanic woman, and she snatched the guy's "Make America Great Again" hat. She's like, this hat represents slavery and genocide and all this stupid stuff. And I'm like, well, it's like Thomas Sowell says, where's your evidence? Because every leftist argument can be debunked with, where is your evidence? Simply put, there's not a single argument that they'll bring up about racism or lynchings or slavery or Native American genocide that holds water. You stole this land. Last time I checked, at least 90% of this land was paid for or inherited from another European power. Duh, like we bought Louisiana Purchase for like $12 million. If Native Americans weren't at the debate table, sorry, well, they didn't have debating tables, but that's a whole nother topic. Right? So, I mean, we're just living in an age, but I think the demographic situation, the decline of culture, it's all tied in together. I mean, it really starts, it's all started to get around the same time. You can't really look at it separately. It's all intertwined. So since the 1950s and the 1960s, we've been raised on, well, white people are evil. There's racial segregation signs. People owe me stuff because of past injustices. And because that brainwashing has been so filtered through everything, we're just living in just dystopian sort of nightmare at this point. And it comes to this issue where you say, since when do immigrants get more control of the conversation than native-born citizens? That has to be like a fact at this point. Historically, throughout America, we have always had tight policy on racial, ethnic policy, whether you think it's right, wrong, or not. Quite frankly, I think it's right to think about, hey, we're trying to hold the glue of society together, right? But it's this whole concept of, well, immigrants need to come here because they're in this bad situation. That's their problem, not ours. But because we're in this age of diversity and equality and all this stuff, the sharing and stuff that doesn't even mean anything. It's like, what does that mean? That's basically communism creeping in. And then we're calling people racist, which is just mean shut up white people. That's all the word racist means in this day and age. It's just shut up white people. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else but that. But it's this thing of, we're in this sort of cultural Marxist Fabian society, Frankfurt School sort of idea that, well, it's time to just throw America in the garbage because of this one world policy or this communist utopia that they want to build or whatever it is. So, I mean, it's all tying together. But, in terms of the demographic situation, I don't really see it getting better. And unfortunately, that's sort of like, bad news to the people watching, this YouTube channel. But I hate to break that to people. I don't see how it's getting better, or I think it's just getting worse. And also the lying. Anybody ever notice like how much lying they do? Because I've seen say where they say, well, white people are still 70% of the population. No, white people are at least 62% of the population and going down fast. So it's this question of, and also there's this type of, well, it doesn't pertain, it's white people's issue, doesn't pertain to me. African Americans, to anybody who's a Black American who's been here prior to, Civil War and all that sort of stuff, you're next for replacement, just so you know. They're going to replace you with people from Kenya and Somalia and God knows what, right? We're just living a nightmare. So it's time for everybody to just, stop crying racism and just pick up by their bootstraps and have the courage to come here. I've never done a media interview, but I'm quite frankly mad. And that makes for great ranting, so I'll let you jump in there. But yeah, that's just sort of my first general thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, and please rant all you like. But I agree with you. And well, first of all, I agree with you that we were being lied to about the demographics, and Ann Coulter breaks this down really wonderfully in Adios America and talks about how we've been told for, 20 or 30 years that there's 10 million illegals or something like this. They've been using the same number for 20 or 30 years. And I grew up in the Southwest. And so I saw the demographic change firsthand. I mean, I grew up in a town that was, 90%. I grew up in Las Vegas. It was 90%, plus white. And then we had a small Black neighborhood and then a couple of Latinos when I was a little girl, just a few. And now it looks like Brazil. You go to just about anywhere in Las Vegas and whites are overwhelmingly a minority, like even in the quote unquote white neighborhoods or what used to be white neighborhoods, even up until recently, they're 40% or less of the population. It literally looks like Brazil. You have Arabs and Somalis and then Black Americans, and then loads of illegal immigrants. And the same is true of Southern California, which I spent a lot of time in as a child. If you look at San Diego and you look at LA and you look at all of these places that were majority white with kind of a 10 to 15% Black population, which is kind of what America looked like before we had mass
neighborhood. Yeah, traditional.
Exactly. I grew up in a neighborhood about 16 houses, and we were all white. We had one Black family. He was they didn't have kids, older retired doctor. But anyway, so that was kind of the American family. You turned on the TV, you saw, Family Ties, you saw Wonder Years, you saw white families, and then, you had the Cosbys. And so you had like kind of this 10% Black American, and then you have about 90, anywhere from 85, 90% white America. And that was reflected in the culture and the demographics and everything else. And then we've been completely taken over, just completely and entirely. And I was really shocked to find out recently, looking over in North Carolina and in the South and areas like that, there's lots of towns over there that are now, the kindergartners are majority non-white, they're majority Latino, they're Hispanic. Like in North Carolina, the town that Mayberry was based on, everybody kind of knows the Andy Griffith show. It's kind of a Leave It to Beaver era, 1950s, 1960s classic Americana show that was based on a real town. And that real town right now is majority non-white. If you look at the children in that town, it's majority Hispanic or Latino. And so we are experiencing rapid cultural change through immigration, but we are also definitely 100% being lied to about it. And my friend, I talk about her often because she gives me so many inspirational ideas for my channel, but she's Black. And we were talking the other day and she said, they tell us Black Americans about 13% of the population. And now they're telling us, Latinos are about 12%, which I don't even believe that is true. I believe it's higher than that.
It's got to be way more. It's got to be way more,
just observationally, just going through anywhere in America. But at any rate, she's like, at what point even do Black Americans stand up, and start saying, we got to stop this illegal immigration because we're being taken over as well. It isn't even about just the white people anymore. It's about all the people. And you're right. There are people the Black Americans such as yourself and my friend. You guys have, 8 generations or more of history here and fought in wars and helped to build things. And now, your inheritance as well as just being handed over. And it's true, the powers that are behind all of this, they're not going to stop at white people. And that's something that myself and colleagues of mine in this movement have been talking about for years, is that, okay, what do you think is going to happen after whites are gone? Then they're going to come for mixed race people that that look white, you know, that have either white ancestry or are very light skinned. They're going to come after,
Yeah,
you know,
you're not dark skinned enough. That's what they're going to say. You're not
exactly.
dark skinned enough. Japanese people, they're going to come for Japanese people. Anybody doing well above third world status is next, you know. So
exactly. It's going to be, you're going to have Asian privilege, and you're going to have mixed race privilege, and you know, and then and like you said, Black Americans are, you know, I've seen lots of genetic tests from Black friends, you know, and I've never seen less than 15% white in their genetic test. Right. So it's at least 15, anywhere 15 to 25% white admixture in Black Americans. So they're going to start coming after that. Well, you know, Black Americans are too white. You know, they're not as Black as Somalis. They're not as Black as the Congo lady that climbed the Statue of Liberty the other day. You know, y'all are too white. And they're, you know, you've got that 15 or 20% white privilege in you or whatever. It's just, it doesn't stop. It never stops.
Well, I don't want to, I don't want to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
There's so much to touch on. It's like, first of all, it's like we talked about how immigrants are given, you know, more privilege than American citizens, I guess. But it's like, since when did people from South America and Middle East and India and Southeast Asia become Americans? It's like, historically, I don't think that's ever been the case. But it's like, now you have people from Nicaragua and Brazil and Mexico, and it's just becoming a very unpleasant place. And you know, this weekend I was actually in New York City, Manhattan. I was walking around. I was in Manhattan and just going through Central Park. And I remember talking to the older people in my family, and they would say, when you left Harlem, like everything south of Harlem, Sugar Hill, Washington Heights, the only people you would see is white people. That's it. Today, anybody, and I know people like Lauren Rose, she lives in New York City, and this sort of, and anybody who knows, who's been in New York City knows what I'm talking about. It is the multicultural capital of the world, literally. Like, it's so much diversity. And the thing of it that you realize is like, diversity is kind of boring after a certain point. Like, it really is. Like, nobody wants to admit that. But I'm like, well, there's a lot of things going wrong with New York. But it's basically, it's like, no, this diversity thing is kind of bunk, because people are living in their own mini societies. Everything's getting fractured. And it's one of these places. But the reason they do it is because they can say, well, America's stolen land. White people took stuff. So everybody's an American citizen. Now, even from the kid, I knew that this was kind of bunk. I'm like, everybody's an American? Seems like some people.
Oh.
The country, right? But
I lost the sound there for just a second. Oh, that was strange. I don't know if it was the same for, hey, in the chat, y'all tell me if you lost the sound for a second, because I lost the sound there for a couple of seconds, and I don't know if it was me. Let's just pause for a second and see if they'll let me know in the chat. Did y'all lose the sound for a minute? Let me ask them too. Yeah, everybody says yeah. We got some yeses.
Oh.
Okay, I don't know what that was.
That's crazy. Is it back?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it seems to be back now. But just about, I don't know. Yeah, about 5 seconds. Yeah. Charlie says sound was lost. Okay, so let's just back up for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you mid-rant. We just kind of lost you for a second there. So let's go back to where we were.
No, but I was basically saying that I was going through New York City, and it's become sort of this multicultural diversity capital, you know, sort of the world. It's becoming an unpleasant place. It's not the same place, but it's not just there. It's all over the country. And anybody who opens their mouth and says it's kind of an issue, it's like, well, wait a minute. If rights pertain to Black people in America, then they pertain to all people, because that's called being principled. And that's one of the things we can actually call being principled, which means that if something applies to you, it applies to everybody. So I don't understand where, white people stand up for themselves after everybody's talking trash about this stuff, which is mostly not true in the first place. And we could definitely get into that. But it's just trash talking. That's all it is. It has no weight whatsoever, and it's just part of this agenda to just take down the country at this point. So it's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I think a great way to look at this, touching on a point that you made earlier, is kind of looking at concentric circles. And I think we all kind of navigate a variety of identities. You know, I mean, myself, I'm a woman, I'm a Christian, I'm a mother, I'm white, I'm American, I have a lot of a lot of identities. And so when I'm navigating those worlds, a lot of those identities are navigating the world. A lot of those identities are under attack. And so when I'm looking at Christianity and when I'm working with my Christian brothers and sisters, I'm not saying, oh, you're a Protestant, I can't work with you, or you're Catholic, I can't work with you, or you're a Mormon. No, I'm looking at all Christians. It's like, you believe Christ is your savior. Let's work together to fight back against the anti-Christian culture. And I think the same is true for white people. We often talk about in pro-white circles about, well, we're Irish white or Slavs white. And that's mostly a joke. But it's like, no, we kind of have to have a pan-European kind of understanding of white, because white people and culture are under attack. So it's not the time to say, oh, you're Slavic and whatever. And for Western culture, and particularly American culture, I think also we can look at it as like a larger concentric circle spiraling out from other identities. And it's really time, I think, for Black Americans and white Americans to say, look, we are being swamped with these, refugees, quote unquote, and these illegal aliens. And if we don't stand up together and do something to take our country back, we're all gonna lose here in this situation. And so definitely fighting for Western culture in general is not a time to be saying, oh, well, you're this or that or whatever. It's like, no, if you're Western, let's fight back. So there's different fights. We've got multiple battlefronts. We've got multiple things under attack. And I think that's an area that's really hard for a lot of people to kind of wrap their mind around, because people want to see the world more dynamically. They want to see it as more black and white. So if white people feel under attack, they just want to say, well, it's all non-white people and it's all this, and it's all that. And kind of just or Christian, Christian versus pagan, also that's another thing in the pro-white movement. We have a lot of pagans, we have a lot of Christians, and a lot of people will say, hey, I don't care if you're pagan or Christian, as long as you're fighting for the rights for white people to exist, then I'll work with you. And so we have to have kind of an understanding that, like you were saying before, it is all interconnected and it is all intricate. And once we've saved Western civilization, okay, then we can parse out some more details after that. But right now, it's like the house is on fire. We need to put out the fire, and I don't care who's carrying the bucket of water right now. Let's put out this fire, right. And then we can get to the more untangling this mess and the little finer details. But I think that's something that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, because you can't escape what's happening. Like, you can't escape what's happening. This it affects everybody living in the Western world. I'm a millennial. I'm a young guy, and people think, well, you're just advocating for white supremacy. It's like, no, I'm just advocating that white people have rights too. But I'm a young guy. I have so many different interests. And I was at the movie theater watching the Avengers Infinity War movie for the last time. And I'm sitting there watching, I think for like the third time I saw it, right? But I'm watching this movie and I'm like, this is basically what the Western world is going through right now. Like, this is like the end battle, like final, like battle for everything. So it's time to just, like, people say, well, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to deal with backlash or whatever. So what? When Western civilization falls, when these societies like America, just with America in general, like, it's pretty much over. Like, I can't see how these African countries or South America or Middle East or any of these countries in the third world are going to be in better shape without the Western world. That's historically not true. We are actually just hurting these people by going through the suicide mission of saying, well, time for open borders, time to just let everything go to hell. We're hurting these people more than we are helping them by dragging here. There's a famous video. I think it's Immigration and Gumballs. That's what it's called. And it's probably one of the best videos that people can go look up, because it said, okay, we could bring 1 million people here, or 2 million people from here, 8 million people here. We're not changing anything. Things are just getting worse in these countries. And then you say, well, let's bring over just the high IQ people. Well, for anybody that has any sort of an ounce of IQ left, if you bring all the high IQ people over here, who's left? The low IQ people who started the problem in the first place, right? So let's just give them all cozy 6-figure jobs in America and don't worry about your home country. That's the default for these people. And it's like, well, you're not really helping anything. And quite frankly, if America, I know there are beautiful societies in Europe, but I'm thinking about the achievement level of America.
Mm-hmm.
It literally, like, there's literally a study on this, and I was listening to a guy that I love, David Barton, sort of a conservative Christian guy. He said that America is 4% of the world's population, yet we produce more everything than the other 96% combined. Mm-hmm. Every year, whether it is scientific technology, symphonies, music, art, whatever it is, we just produce more than the rest of the world. We're a small fraction of the world, and we own like 30-something% of the world's wealth. That's not by accident, in my opinion. That's not by accident. And people get mad and say, well, you're talking trash about my country. No, I'm just saying America has a special place in the world. And I was looking at just at a map, and I'm like, with the exception of Britain, I just don't see the achievement level rivaled by any other country in the world. I just really don't see it. And even when Western Europe is going on this suicide mission, I think it's just kind of over for people on the world general. I don't understand why it is that when people say, well, white people did this, the bad thing, this thing, that, I'm like, well, haven't white people kind of done good stuff for the world too? Kind of a one-sided argument. You know, those trains and those airplanes, that electricity and the computer. Hello, right? But it's with this one side, you know. But we could definitely get into a whole lot of things from history. But you know, that's just my feeling.
Yeah. It's always ironic when people, you know, try to tell me online how evil white people are, and they're using the internet and the cell phone, and you know,
they're driving around in a car talking about how evil white people. I'm like, what? Get out of here. It makes no sense. I'm like, that's so hypocritical.
Yeah, and definitely, you know, it was several years ago that during my kind of red pilling experience, waking up experience, that I happened to look up. You know, what were the biggest life-saving technologies ever invented? Because my husband and I were having this talk and discussion about technology and everything, and we decided to look it up. And you know, we weren't sure, you know, if it was some kind of medical thing or whatever. And we were surprised it was, you know, artificial fertilizers, because we can grow more food and more people don't starve to death. And of course, that was a German scientist that invented that. And then we were looking up, you know, kind of second to that was penicillin, you know, and it was a Scottish guy. And we're kind of like sitting there going like, okay, like I get that white people, like definitely colonialism and all that, there's some rough patches there. I won't deny it. But if you look at how many lives have been saved through technology and scientific advances from the Western world, it's just, it boggles the mind. And to think, you know, even people that are living in the third world have had their lifespans just about tripled due to Western technology and due to the fact that through our charity, we share it as much as possible, even to our own detriment. Is just amazing. But nobody wants to give the Western world and our ancestors any credit for that. In fact,
think about how controversial that sounds. Think about how controversial that sounds. They will, CNN, MSNBC, the Clown News Network, all of them will get onto you, a housewife of 6 kids, and say, man, that's racist. I can't believe that's racist. How could she say that? That's so racist. Well, first of all, here's a black guy. This guy right here is saying, yeah, invention's kind of been a white Western European Anglo-Saxon thing. You can get mad, but that's just true. Up until a few hundred years ago, that's kind of been the truth. So you can get mad, but you know, facts don't care about your feelings, you know, like Ben Shapiro says. So
right, exactly. Yeah, and I think it was that mindset that I was coming at, you know, kind of once I got out of that emotional, that emotional lefty kind of notion that I'd been given in public school and raised with it, and just started, you know, just I want the facts, you know, just the facts, what happened and when, and I want to take all emotion out of this and just look at this in a logical way. Then it's like, wow, there's so many different ways to look at it. And we are just being fed just this one narrative, and it's completely destructive, because like you said, you know, I don't know what's going to happen to the world once America goes down. And then of course, if, you know, Europe's going down with us, then there's no rebuilding what America was, since, you know, America's kind of an offshoot of Europe originally. And so, you know, what's going to happen? It's kind of like, you know, if I have a baby and he's still nursing, and if he's getting his food from me, but then like I I stop eating, or I kill myself or something, he can't get anything from me. And so it's like the whole rest of the world that's benefiting from us. It doesn't do any good if we commit suicide, because it doesn't help them. It just throws them back into the dark ages, without the ability, to do better for themselves. And we can go into like why that is or whatever, but the bottom line is that, the third world countries haven't been able to do better for themselves, and they're doing better because of Western society right now. It's kind of pulled the whole world up, really. No matter where you go, things are better now because of the Western world.
Well, you bring up an interesting point there, and that's, you said, give me the facts. We've taken facts and blown things up to a point where it doesn't make any sense. And they can put me on the news and say, the new face of advocating white supremacy to a black guy. No. Let's stick with the facts. Like, for example, I was talking about this with my friend earlier. They talk about lynchings and black people being killed by white people in America. It's like, okay, well, let's think about this. Every black civil rights movement, organization, whatever, including the NAACP, says that between the years of 1865 and 1965, there were a little over 3,400 black people that were killed by a white mob. Whether it's justified or unjustified, it's a whole nother topic. But 3,400 people, that's what we get. There's 43 million black people living in the country now. Even if we take the lowest number, if we take the 1920 census number, there were like 10,463,000 black people living in America. If we took 10,463,000 people, that's only 0.00001% of the black population who's ever been lynched by a white person. Mm-hmm, Why are we giving so much airtime to stuff that is basically mathematically non-existent? But see, that's how they present. They've taken every little nook and cranny of America. We say, okay, well, here's something to criticize. Okay, here's the Little Rock 9 thing. We're going to blow that up for the 20th. Oh, Martin Luther King, here we go. A guy that most black people didn't even like that much, but he's a hero now. Right. So we've taken every little thing and we said, well, we can demonize. And the Marxist narrative, it's clever, but it doesn't hold weight. It's like when anything, well, let's embrace socialism, get rid of capitalism. That doesn't help anybody. Let's get rid of democracy, Republican governments, borders. Let's just get rid of it. And it doesn't hold up. And it's like, well, then they give the argument of slavery. Slavery's been over, what, 155, 160 years ago? Are you a slave? It is 2018. Why are you mad about slavery? Get a job and pull your pants up. Like this, black people are just upset with this victim narrative of saying, do you know? And here's another thing. You notice how they never talk about the hundreds of thousands of white dudes that got blown up fighting for the freedom of black people? Like, that's the thing that I got into history. It's like, what about those people? What about Andrew Carnegie? He gave like $600,000 or something like that to Booker T. Washington to start the school for black kids. What about those people? It's this one-sided history lesson. And I get mad at people who buy into it because I'm like, listen, you're not being honest. You don't care about people. So stop acting like you care. And you notice how it happens all over the world. Nobody says anything. Like they'll talk about Jim Crow laws in America. And I tried to explain this to people. Racial and ethnic segregation, separation laws, whatever you want to call it, have happened at some point in almost every country in the world. It happens everywhere to this day outside of white people land, in case you didn't notice. That's a fact. That's acknowledged in Japan, in the Middle East, in Nigeria. Well, they killed all the white people in Rhodesia, and they're doing that in South Africa too. So they don't even apologize for it there. But it's just all the stuff that happens to black people in Mexico and Brazil. There's muzzles. Like it doesn't even get aired. And that's the part of the whole the terrorist operation sort of part of it. It's like, well, we're not going to talk about that stuff, even if it happens every single day. And by the way, none of that stuff is slavery or racial segregation. It doesn't exist today. And then you have this whole element of demonizing America. We do a lot about American history. And I was just listening to Jesse Lee Peterson the other day. My grandmother and all my family on my dad's side who grew up in the South, black people, say the same thing. Black people did well for themselves under racial segregation in the South. That's a fact. Like, I don't know why you can get mad about it. But and here's the thing. You notice how they only focus on the southern states. You never hear about what's happening in New England, the North, out west, the Midwest. Well, what about the laws there? Well, there's not really any racial segregation laws. There are in terms of marriage. But in many of these states, you go to Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Pennsylvania, New York, racial segregation by government force is illegal. And the same thing for Colorado, Washington, Idaho, illegal. California, Nevada, none of these states ever had legal discrimination or segregation, whatever you want to call it, on the books. That just didn't happen. But we sort of focused on the southern states because it's the sort of homeland of Black America. And it's very convincing to say that the society is just riddled with shame and everything else. It's like, well, no, Black people did very well for themselves. And even I was watching an interview Jesse Lee Peterson did, and my family's done the same thing. It's like, well, weren't Black people being killed, and wasn't there white people being mean to them? It's like, maybe somewhere. I never met any of those people. I even asked my great-grandfather, he grew up in South Carolina, early 20th century. And I was asking him about all this stuff. And you know, they're talking about racism and all this white people. It must have been terrible for you guys. He's like, Tyler, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he had to tell me that. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, yeah, it's true that there was segregation laws, but we went to separate businesses. But a lot of times we got along just fine. So I don't know what you're talking about. I remember the Klan, a bunch of Democrats were on through it to burn people's stuff down in some parts of the state, kind of like we have today. It's unbelievable, right? But it's like, no, this victim narrative, it's not working. It doesn't hold up. And you could tell when they cut people's mic off. And there's a whole nother thing, the rudeness. Like, this is something else I've noticed. When did people become rude? Mm-hmm. Like, you cut people, you invite someone on to have a debate, and then you cut their microphone off and talk over them and don't let their position get out, and you cut to a commercial and all this other stuff. That's not open debate. That's just you being part of the mafia at this point. It's just a thug operation. This is just a terrorist operation, because you don't have any validity to what you're talking about. And that's why they demonize housewives with 6 kids and all this sort of stuff. Because they won't last 5 minutes when you bring facts to them. And that's sad on their part. But that's the good thing for us, is that we have facts on our side. So, you know, that's something I'm happy about.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's our biggest weapon is the truth. But you're right, you know, and I've talked a lot. I was born in the South, and my Southern family and everything. And it was really funny because, you know, again, I grew up in the liberal public school system, and I was told everything under the sun was racist. And I used to kind of think my relatives were racist, you know, because we would go back, you know, and I'd visit, and, you know, sometimes I had a cousin who used the N-word sometimes, and not even in a derogatory manner. It was just like, oh, you know, we were in a restaurant, like, oh, there's a, you know, almost as a description, but not, I mean, anyways, and then, you know, I had some family that would make, you know, fried chicken and watermelon jokes, but at the same time, they made jokes about Mexicans, they made jokes about white people. It was just like jokes that everybody joked about everybody.
We're living in a sensitized culture. Stuff like that was just normal back then, but now it's like, I'm offended, so.
Right. Well, and the Black people would do it too to white people. Like, they would make jokes too. And it was so funny because when I actually stopped and thought about it, I was like, yeah, but anytime any of my family interacted with a Black person, they never treated them any different. It wasn't all like, oh, don't talk to me, you're Black. Or, I mean, nothing, that never happened. It's like, oh, hello, sir, how are you? I mean, they were perfectly nice. I mean, it was just, you know, there were jokes thrown around, certainly, and a little bit of stereotyping, but it wasn't impactful of anybody's actual behavior. Nobody was hurting anybody. Nobody was, you know, denying people jobs or, you know, interactions or any of that. And so it's really funny. And so when I had to actually be honest, and again, you know, getting past the emotions of what I was raised with and sit down and look at the facts and go like, okay, yeah, well, they might have made a fried chicken joke or something, but like, if, you know, a Black guy was in a car accident right in front of them, like, any of my relatives would have run there and pulled him out of the car. You like, you know, nobody would have been like, oh, I'm not gonna help him, he's Black. You know, it's just ridiculous, this kind of like lie that we've been sold. And then it's also interesting to just see that, you know, we naturally kind of, a lot of people segregate, and, you know, along different lines depending on what the population is. But if you put a bunch of Christians and pagans in a room, you know, the Christians are probably going to sit together at lunchtime, and the pagans are probably going to sit together at lunchtime. And you see that at racial lines too. You see it in churches and school cafeterias, a lot of times divide up along racial lines. It doesn't mean anyone's racist. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that we naturally tend to kind of cluster with people that are the most like us. And sometimes that does break down along racial lines. Sometimes it's religious lines. It kind of depends on, you know, or culture, depending on where you're at. Like, if you took a group of Americans and dumped them in Japan, no matter what their color is, they'd probably all kind of cluster together. So it breaks down along different lines at different times. Well, we do naturally self-segregate a bit based on just wanting to be around people like us and having similar preferences, and like that's the reality of the world too. And then, of course, I wouldn't be for forced segregation of any kind, but I think it's absolutely mind-blowing how just natural self-segregation is completely not allowed, but only from white people. Like if, Black people can, or Mexican people, or anybody can go online and say, I only date Black people, or I only date Mexicans.
If white people did that, they would call the FBI and just shut down the place at that point. Blackpeoplemeet.com. Try having a whitepeoplemeet.com and see how well that goes. It's not going to go well.
Oh, exactly. And so it's this bizarre double standard. And it's really funny because I when I got into doing this, I didn't realize I was mostly, started seeing like, oh, okay, like white people aren't allowed to do this, so I'm going to do it. I'm kind of like poking the bear of like, well, if you can say Black solidarity, then I can say white solidarity, and I just kind of started doing that. I was like shocked. Obviously, I've talked about this a lot, at like the blowback and the lies and the bullying and the stalking, and it's like, what? Like, it's really scary to see how far off the rails we've gotten from just having a normal dialogue. And it's just making everyone so worked up in their own minds about everything that's happening. But not to get too far off into the weeds, I wanted to get back a little bit to lynching, because that was another big red pill for me. I grew up with the lynching thing and, narrative, and even in graduate school, there was a mixed race girl in my class who presented this poem about lynching and all this. And I was like, wow, this was a really big problem. It really devastated the Black community. Then I looked into it, like you said, found out that it was only a couple thousand people that were even lynched in all of the history of Southern America. And then I found out, depending on what statistic you look at, 1/4 to 1/3 of them were white. Like lynching was just
that's a fact. That's a fact. Yeah. 20 to 25% of all the people that were ever lynched by the Klan were white. That's a fact.
Right. It was so, as much as I don't agree with lynching and I don't agree with mob justice, obviously lynching was more of a mob rule kind of a problem, and not even really a racial problem. And also other Blacks lynched other Blacks. I loved the show Unsolved Mysteries growing up as a kid, and there's this really famous plantation down in Louisiana that's supposedly haunted. And the very brief backstory to that was that there was a house slave, and she was worried that she was going to be replaced and sent back out to the fields, which is the less desirable slave position, to work in the fields. And so she thought that she could endure herself to the family if she made the wife and the children of the plantation owner a little bit ill, and then nurse them back to health. But she mixed some oleander poison into a cake that she baked for them, but she didn't know how to measure it properly. And she ended up killing the 2 little girls and the wife of the house. And when she confessed what she did to another one of the slaves got together and were like, oh, heck no, we don't want the white man coming after us, thinking we did it. We're going to make sure that you pay for this, and that we are clear to our master that we are not associated with you. We did not poison these people. And so they lynched her in the front lawn to show a clear sign that they did not agree with what she had done and were horrified by it. And then even that story, it's really funny because when I was growing up, it was presented as that slave that had poisoned the girls. She was shown in such an unbelievably sympathetic light that it wasn't until I grew up and kind of, was going through these untwisting my mind from what I had been taught and looking back and going, oh my gosh, like she killed 2 children and a woman, and like she's presented as the sympathetic character. Like that's pretty crazy that our world is like that twisted, in the way that it presents our history.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things, and it's so unfortunate that American citizens do not know anything about history whatsoever. But I think the more this political correctness comes in, people don't want to know, right? Mm-hmm. The only reason that this whole alt-right, white nationalism, Christianity, all this stuff has come up because of the left's political correctness. No one will say any different. Like most of the white guys I know that are in your sort of movement will say, well, I didn't start out this way. Like I remember Christopher Cantwell saying the same thing. I never focused on this stuff. Why are you putting so much importance on this subject? Nobody was racist until they showed up. So people are shutting down. So if I were to say, for example, and it continues to radicalize people. So people who come into this movement with good intentions will say, well, I'm not really interested in hearing certain parts of history. But if I were to tell the people listening to this show that a black man named James Armistead from Virginia literally won the Revolutionary War, most people would say, what? We had black people fighting the Revolutionary War. That'd be the first thing. And last of all, we had a black guy that won the Revolutionary War. That's right. Look him up. He was a double spy at the Battle of Yorktown. Look him up. What about and you mentioned slavery and lynchings. What about Peter Salem? What about James Armistead? What about Jean Dusable, who founded the city of Chicago? Everybody can tell you that Chicago is the black on black crime capital of the world. Nobody says that the city of Chicago was founded by a black guy, something we should know. It's kind of ironic that that's the case, right? The one city that's founded by a black guy is like the crime capital for black on black crime. But it's interesting how they make that happen. But and also, what about all the black preachers of that sort of revolutionary time? People like Harry Hoosier, Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, names you don't even hear today. Totally gone. Matter of fact, Harry Hoosier, when John Adams, later in his life, when he was an old man, I think around 1816, 1818, he was asked by a historian, who's responsible for this nation that we have? And he said a lot of different names, but they were all preachers. They were all Christian preachers, and many of them were black. That's something we should know, because all of the rights listed in our Declaration were stuff that we were hearing on the pulpit, hearing the preacher and the reverend talk about 20 years before. And now we're saying Christianity is a moot point. Everything about American society is founded on Christianity. I will debate anybody on that anytime. There's not any element, whether it comes to separation of church and state, republicanism, the Liberty Bell, every aspect of life is founded on Christianity. Nobody can refute that, but we don't even hear it today. And also the Harry Hoosier story. Harry Hoosier, he's one of the most prevalent preachers in American history. Does anybody, that name sound familiar to you, Hoosier? Sort of like the Indiana Hoosiers. How many people in Indiana know that was the Wild West back in the revolutionary days? Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, that was the sort of craziest people you could find. Then in Kentucky and Tennessee, we had these sort of Scots-Irish people showing up that were kind of wild, right? That was the other thing. And he goes around preaching to these people. And people start saying, why are all these thousands, tens of thousands of white people coming to Christ? Oh, they're those Hoosier guys. There's those Hoosier guys. That's where the name Indiana Hoosiers comes from. It comes from a black evangelist. I doubt anybody going to that school or that college knows that. But it's just one more element of saying, well, we're just going to focus on the negativity. It's like, well, that kind of hurts everybody in that case. But it's with anything with American history, whether it's stolen land or anything we could talk about, really. But it's just such a logic fail. It feels to people's emotions. But that's all it does. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't fix anything. There's no solutions. There's no legislation. There's no people saying, hey, let's just start doing this, make sure rights are secure for.
Oh, we lost sound again. Can you hear me?
People on the left. That's
you're coming in and out again. We're losing a little bit of sound.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Oh, okay. I think you're back.
Right. So basically it's saying that we're just going to focus on negativity and take rights away. But it's like, no, we should be giving people rights. If you really believe in all this negativity and stuff, you should be wanting to give rights more than anything. But they don't believe in the concept of rights. And they certainly don't believe that everybody has them. Only certain people have them.
Oh, definitely. 100%. So one of the things that you had put in the description of what you wanted to talk about was thinking about America feeling like an extended home. And that really stood out to me because I had been working on writing. I've been writing this piece for a while that I haven't published yet. It's very long, about thinking about America and our nation as an extended family. And so how do you view that? Like, what is that concept for you, seeing America as an extended home?
Well, the first thing I would really say is getting back to basics. And when I was thinking about this subject, is the immigration and the multiculturalism is the number one key element to it. There are a lot of other elements to it, I would say, but that's one of the biggest ones. And one of the other topics I wanted to talk about, which is part of this, is the decline of business ownership in this country. Another thing we were founded on is business ownership, is entrepreneurship. Nobody talks about that. People say, I want my job, I want my 9 to 5. And so long as the people in this movement say, well, we're going to turn America into a white country again, but you don't put the business ownership behind it, you look stupid. There's no way of saying that. Because if you're in a job saying, I'm going to sit here, work for 40, 50 hours a week with not enough money, and then ask to try and fix the culture of the American society, it's not going to happen. So that's a huge element to it. But the other thing I would say is just getting back to things that, you know, get your kids watching stuff about America, watch History Channel. Hopefully it's not infiltrated with leftist stuff, but get your kids, like if you have young kids, get them to watch something like Liberty Kids. That's an awesome show. That's an awesome show for people to watch, for their kids to watch. It's like, just take your kids to the gun range. Go out, you know, just to 4th of July parade. Teach your kids about American history. Just go out and do things that are known with America, because soon people, like, it's gotten to this point where people don't even know what American culture is anymore.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
That's something that people need to reflect on, that they don't even know how they were raised or they grew up. And it's sort of just based. You really don't even think about culture until because you're raised in it. You're born in it. You don't move to another place and they're like, oh, I behave differently than these people. It's something you always grow up with. But that's declining now. That's declining. And I also hate to say this, but I think it's definitely time for people who are on the mentally sane side of the argument to stop talking so much in terms of saving America and rather preserving it. Take everything you can find about America, put it in a museum somewhere. Get together with your community, your town. Put up a museum. Start preserving stuff. Stash stuff away. You know, anything you can possibly find, because I don't believe that we're going to necessarily save this country. I think we can maybe bring it back after it crumbles. I don't see where everything between the feminization, the transsexual agenda, the massive displays of wealth. I mean, it really is. I was watching a Stefan Malna video. It's literally history repeating itself with a different costume. It is. I mean, every civilization is falling the same way that we're going now. So I'm not putting my money on we're going to save America. I think the best bet would be to preserving America. Sometimes you got to let something go in order to save it. And I think that's something that we're really missing in this day and age.
Yeah, definitely. 100% agree with that. I think the collapse at this point is pretty inevitable. I think that we've kind of reached the tipping point. I don't know that there is any going back and saving it. I think there's maybe a slowing it down a little bit, that we've bought maybe some time with Trump and a few of the things that he's doing. But yeah, definitely. And I really agree with you. Preserving it so that we can rebuild it in the future is a wonderful idea. So entrepreneurship, again, I think that's so important. And I love that you wanted to talk about that as well, because I think that you did hit something really crucial there, in that America was founded by, 90% white people and whatever. And a lot of people like to point that out. But they weren't just random white people. They also were very hardworking, very, very strong work ethic. Kind of the only modern day equivalent we would have would be the Amish. These were people that were getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're working until sunset. And they're doing it on very little food, and they're really thinking ahead to the future, and they're really doing for themselves. And if we try to rebuild America in as some white majority, but all the white people are lazy, and like you just said, they just want to punch a clock and not do for themselves and not get out there and innovate and create and build businesses, then it isn't going to work. And again, back to the Amish. 3 out of every 4 Amish startup businesses succeed, which is an astonishing number in the business world. Because if you're looking in general, most startup businesses do not succeed. And for them to succeed is overwhelming. And then, people will sit there and say, well, why is it? But it's, again, it's because they still get up at 4 a.m. and they still work 12-hour shifts, and they do it as a family. They work their teenagers, and the teenagers are able to save money and learn good values through that. And all of these things that the wider population in America, including the white population, has really let go of a lot of that and forgotten about how that builds so much strength, and we can look around and we can see that Disney's buying out this company and Viacom is buying out that, and we just have further and further consolidation of media and journalism, and we have to look at that and say it's the more we let that continue to happen, and we don't start up our own businesses and again also buying from our own businesses, people need to put out the effort as much as they're able to, putting their dollars and cents into small business owners and startups and things like that when they're able to, instead of, maybe paying $1 or $2 more for their coffee and getting it online through one of these conservative coffee companies or something, whatever it is, looking for those opportunities in their life to kind of invest in their community and make it stronger. And then we'll have these independent business owners and not this oligarchy of media and corporate rule that we have right now that is really a huge problem in America, and it's a huge hindrance towards more people getting the facts that you and I have been talking about today.
Yeah, and it's also this thing, and you mentioned this concept of hard work. It's not so much hard work, and that's a great part of it too, but it's also creativity. Creativity is something that's totally dead, because when I talk to most people about business ownership, well, they say, well, I have to work 40, 50 hours a week. That's only if you do it wrong. I know people who work, 10, 20 hours a week and make way more than enough money, and they're perfectly happy with their family. And this is a great topic for this traditional movement too. You can be a housewife, it is possible, and still go work your business 5, 10 hours a week, make $100,000 a year, and still spend enough time to raise a family. That's possible. Yeah. We've lost that in this country. So the problems that we see, we're like, why are these problems? It's like, yes, it's true because of the left and the media and the government and all this sort of stuff, but we are largely responsible. How many people in this movement can go over and tell me, hey, what's my neighbor's name? I doubt that you can do. I don't care if it's a white neighborhood or anything else. You know your neighbor's name, and most people are like, no. Okay, well, why is anything going to change? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, YouTube's doing this, and the Federal Reserve is doing that, and the government saying this. It didn't matter back in the day what the government did. Nobody cared what most people forget in the early days in America, elections weren't popular. People didn't really care that much who was the president or who was this person or who was that. We were a society of people that said, hey, you know what? If I can't get into this or this isn't working for me, I'm going to go do it myself. Yeah. You don't see that today at all. So we've lost our independence. So that's a huge thing. And it's also this concept of I'm better off just captive to somebody. But you got to remember, if you're captive to somebody, they'll do whatever they want to you. So guess what? You can't go take that vacation unless your boss tells you. You don't get a raise unless your boss tells you. You can't preach at work unless your boss says you can. You can't even take a Bible to work unless your boss says you can. So at a certain point, it's really convincing to say, well, there's this, that, and third because of other people. But we have to start putting the emphasis on what are we doing. I have a business, Ayla. I don't even advertise online or anything for what I do. I have a trading advisory. I do stock marketing, crypto trading advice, and all that sort of stuff. I helped write a lot of the computer code on the stock market. That's a long story. But basically, so I deal with like big time sort of people. But for the little people, it is possible. And one of the biggest people is my mentor, who I would recommend to people, is Josh Tolley. Josh Tolley, you could find him. He has his own radio show, his own YouTube channel, and he has Purple Monkey University, which is the course that I took. That's probably the best resource I could give to anybody talking about how to fix America. Because it's one thing to say, well, the government's doing this, or we need to fix that. We're not going to fix anything. And also, it's one thing to say we're passing legislation. How about people just stand up, go to their town hall, and knock the place over? Like video, I saw that. I know you're going to know what I'm talking about. Everybody's going to know what I'm talking about. Is with this whole gun control issue, and it's a black man by the name of Mark Robinson. He has an awesome speech. It's called "I Am the Majority." Go watch that speech. Every American should be doing that right now. They should be going to this town hall and say, no, you're not dumping Syrian refugees here. No, you're not dumping Mexican illegals here. No, you're not going to take our guns. No, we're not listening to you. No, we're not going to abort half of all the black children in this country. No, no, no. Right. People don't do it. But again, as long as we can get back to that independent spirit, and say the government needs to start fearing us rather than us fearing the government, we can fix everything. But every solution in the world is based on entrepreneurship. The country we live in is built on entrepreneurship. Every church west of Jamestown has been built by entrepreneurship. Sorry. So that has to be number one principle. If you're saying, I need a job, no, you're just helping the destruction of your country and your race by saying that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And actually my husband and I, we've read a lot of books together and had a lot of conversations. And one of the things that we saw was that, Asian populations are like wicked smart and they're incredibly hardworking, but they haven't had the same success level as the West. And we're kind of like looking at it and we're like, where is the disconnect here? Is it Christianity? Is it what is it in Christianity? It definitely is a huge part of it. But also is getting back to what you just said was creativity and innovation. And it's like, you can give a TV to Japan and they'll make you a better one and they'll make it quicker, faster, cheaper, and they'll work really hard at it. But they didn't invent it. It was like a kid in Utah, a farmer boy in Utah that was, had a long time to think.
Philo Farnsworth, yeah, he invented it.
Yeah, exactly. He's out there watching the herds all day and had a lot of time to sit and think about, well, if we can transmit radio waves, how could we transmit visual waves? And just sat and thought it out and thought it through, And so that is what was unique to the West, in particular unique to America, and the way that we went about things as well.
And also, I would say that one of the reasons that there's probably a couple reasons, but it is the political structure over in the Eastern world. It is that. But the thing you're talking about with invention and innovation, that sort of thing, we've lost that. Ever since, I would say, about the 1950s and 60s. Can anybody really remember that big innovation that happened? I mean, I get the cell phone and that sort of thing and the apps that kind of make you stupid, but can you remember the thing that really happened? It's like, well, not really. We kind of just been building on what we have. That's because the more we've put our kids into the education system, which is largely influenced by Henry Ford's assembly line to make little employees that go to work, and it's also influenced by this lack of creativity. Well, I need the government to fix this. I need a job. I need to be told what to do. And in the education system, we repeat, multiple choice questions, repeat, remember this and write it down. That's destroyed our ability to think. How school used to be, you went reading, writing, and arithmetic, 10 kids in a classroom, and you were gone the rest of the day. That's how it used to work. Yeah. Well, today you sit here with packets, books this thick, and they teach you nothing except to repeat whatever you've been taught. So we've lost not only the ability to think for ourselves, but to be creative. We used to teach entrepreneurship and business ownership as the default sort of in this country. That's just what you're going to do. And, you can't stay home, go provide for yourself, bye. That's why people were able to provide for themselves, where the invention comes from. It's where people had skills. Nobody has skills anymore. A lot of guys at the gym you see that are buff. Lots of the millennials are pretty and they're buff, but none of them. I could ask any guy at the gym with his big muscles. Yeah, man, I'm tough. Yeah, been hitting the weight room today, man. Can you change a car tire? No. Can you build your own house? No. Can you hunt your food? No. Have you chopped down a tree? No. Can you strip field a gun? No.
Yep.
And then we're like, well, the Muslims are taking over. They should be taking over. They're raised from independence. Well, not really independence. They have a collectivist mindset, but they're raised from independence of saying, listen, we have a cause here. We're moving forward to it. We're not going to treat you like an idiot. Go out and get it done. And they do. And one of the reasons that immigration is a problem, you can't argue with immigration in economic terms, because immigrants do really well. Because everybody knows that a guy at the gas station or the convenience store is somebody from South Asia. Everybody knows that. So there's something here. If we're saying Indians, the average Indian makes an income of $160,000, $200,000 a year. And the average person in America is making like 50 grand a year or 40 grand a year. It's declining every year, right? But that's for a reason. They don't say, where's my job? They say, where's my business? Where's the opportunity? And usually it's simple. We just have to be willing to do it.
100%. Yep. Well, we are getting a little bit past an hour, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Is there any other topics that we haven't covered? Anything that you want to close with today?
Well, I think we could talk for 10 hours, basically. But I would really suggest to Americans to get this point down. If you haven't heard us on anything else, hear this. Stop listening to other people to give you rights. You give yourself rights. This country wasn't founded on a place that said the only person who has the right to give you rights is God. That's it. That's the only person, not the government. The government's here to protect the rights that you already have. Stop listening to the government at all costs. And that's a radical assertion coming, because that means maybe I'm not paying taxes this year. I'm not paying the toll booth. I'm not dealing with this right now. I'm not listening to that law. I'm going to break the law intentionally. But that's why America exists. So if you want to save it, please do that. Because if you're not, we're having a mute conversation about demographics and white people and black people and this, that, the third. It doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. You're just a dog chasing your tail. So please embrace that spirit. Research everything you can about the American Revolution, please, because I think if we can get back to that space, we have a shot. If we don't, we're just going to move left slower, not move in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Tyler, for joining my show today. It's been a pleasure to have you on and hear everything. And I definitely would love to have you back if you'd be agreeable to that.
I would absolutely love to come back. We could talk for basically all day, but it's been awesome fun. I would love to come back on.
Definitely. Okay. Well, I'll definitely have you back on sometime soon. And thank you for everybody that was in the chat. I saw you guys talking away and participating and having little group discussions over there on the side. And I'm really happy to see that. And hopefully the discussion can continue. Take this out into your community, talk about it, and don't be afraid, particularly my fellow white people, don't be afraid to talk about these issues. I know it can be scary. You can be called a racist, you're called all of this, but stand up for our country. Let's preserve America. Let's preserve this wonderful, beautiful, and unique country that we have, and everything that goes with it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.